Okay, I'm going to begin with our learning sponsors. Year of Learning, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Issa. Friends of Elioni Meiselman, Leah Saba Bas Chanoch Zundel. Friends of Mela Skotsky, Mordechai Zelig Ben Mordechai. Martin Lipman and his family, in memory of his wife, Malka Chana Bas Pinchas. A month of learning by Isaac and Eda Novik, in memory of his mother, Miriam Gittel Bas Chanoch Henach. Perry and Jill Meltzer, in memory of his mother, Malka Bas Baruch, and his sister Godalea Bas David Halevi. Toba and Leo Zimmer, in memory of her mother, Kenya Bas Reb Beryl, and her father, Aaron Ben Yosef Mordechai. B. Pizer, in memory of her husband, Rav Yisrael Chaim Ben David. Stanley Presser, in memory of his mother, Leah Bas Yehuda, his mother-in-law, Golda Bas Leber, and his wife, Ruchel Mincha Bas Moshe. Rabbi Dr. Yankee and Malki Honig, in memory of his mother, Rabbanit Hensha Ita Bat Chaim Yehuda. David and Sharon Karpel, Rabbi Tzvi and Robin Karpel, in memory of David and Tzvi's fathers, Zev Moshe ben Shlomo Yaakov. Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her father, Yehoshua Shia ben Moshe Yehuda HaKohen. Sarah Alpert and family, in memory of her husband, Harav Tzvi Lipa ben Hillel. A week of learning by Harriet Goldman, in memory of her husband, Hillel ben Gershon, David Sabgir, Judy Sabgir Gannon, and Jonathan Sabgir, in memory of their father, Aaron Simcha ben Chaim Sadok. Chaim Aber, in memory of his mother, Freda Matel Bas Shmayahu. We have a day of learning today, being the 16th of February, by Tamar and Milton Fishberger, in memory of her mother, Batya Bat Azriel, as well as by Eva and David Love, in memory of her mother, Chaya Alta Bas Abraham. May the Neshamas have an aliyah, crank Rafia Velti Yeshir Shema Tliya, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael good Gaben Shkiar. Okay. Okay, we are going to start with on the top of Kaf Dalet Amud Aleph with the Mishnah. Okay. Okay. As we start the Mishnah, just a moment, I just want to remind everyone again that when we're talking about offerings, okay, that have to be brought, we were reminding everybody that we've discussed the fact that there's a difference between the usual set of offerings that somebody who's taken on Nazarethship versus, let's say, if somebody who had become Tameh and have to bring. Okay, so the bottom, I don't want to say bottom, but the Nazareth vow as part of the purification process at the end did require three different kinds of offerings. One was a male lamb, which was an olah. One was a female lamb, which was a chatas, and was a ram that was a shlamim. Okay, and the reason I start us off with that, as we're going to see at the beginning of the Mishnah, just a slight issue linguistically, okay? But we'll come back to that as we pointed out.
They were all done at the same time?
Yeah.
They were done serially.
You know, one after the other after the other.
What are the
But-
reasons for them? Chatas because of the sin of
Right.
not partaking in Hashem.
Right.
It's a gezeres hakassim.
Okay, basically, if we think about it, we can approach two approaches very quickly. As Michael suggests, basically that's what's spelled out in the Torah. Okay, now if that's the case, we can then understand the other side, for where we saw, for example, that Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar said that anyone taking on the status of Nazarethship, okay, was doing some sort of a negative act, even though we might have thought, okay, as Chachamim did, no, that it's simply a person seeking to have a closer relationship to Hashem, spirit, right? And we may have thought that would have been considered a positive. Okay, all right, and we could talk about this aside. Okay, but I just want to remind us, okay, of that basis. Okay,
Well, I don't remember which chatas was where you gave an oil first and then a chatas.
okay, that's because they didn't ask you to do it. That okay? That's right.
I feel is because he wants to get the good graces, because he did this, he's bringing an oil, and then he'll bring the chatas.
It's the other way around.
It
Actually,
could be vice versa, what I'm saying. He wants to get in good graces with Hashem, so he brings an oil and holding bird.
No, if
But
not,
he did it, and then he wants to bring the.
it's not fair. He has to be makap there. So he brings the chadras
Yes.
Maybe it's vice versa too. Why can't I think that way?
So what's the shlomim for? Just the,
It's a peace offering. I'm coming for a peace offering. If
Right.
they accept the peace offering, I not can come with a shlomo, I come with something else.
just to help clarify Sid's question, remember the Gemara has been pointing out kapara and slicha. Okay, so on the one hand, while a certain kind of offering may allow us to see a transition for kapara, we still have another offering that could be a reason, like the shlomim, for the slicha. Okay, so just to keep that in mind in connection with the lashon of the Gemara. Okay, all right, let's go into our text now. Matnitin ha'isha shenedra b'nazir. Okay, we have a situation where the woman takes on the vow of Nazirut. Behifrisha et behemta, and she has put aside her animal. Okay, exactly, and that's why I pointed out that it was 3 animals as opposed to her animal. It really should be her animals. Okay, what?
they call birds animals?
Well, they are in a sense. Okay, we're not referring it simply to domestic here as sometimes referred to. Okay, by the term behemoth. But what happens? The fact that it says that it's hers is going to be a question behind the fact of is it really hers, or is it something that her husband has provided, based on whatever requirements he has to fulfill the kasuba. Okay, so we're keeping that question in mind as we now continue to go through the Mishnah. Okay, and afterwards the husband, so the animal or animals have already been put aside, and the husband then proceeds to be mayfair her vow. Okay, im shelo hayta behema, if the animals actually belong to him, tates, okay, namely him being the husband, right? What happens, says the Mishnah, and here in the first case, the animal goes back and returns to the flock, and the status of the animal is no longer consecrated. It's no longer sacred. Okay? V'im shela, and if the animal was hayta behema, and if the animal actually was belonging to her, for example, let's say somebody gave her an animal, and
When it goes up to the field though, it's still consecrated.
No.
No.
it's desanctified
She has no right to take someone
Desanctified.
else's property.
unless the husband, as part of the ksuba, made a commitment. Anything you want to take, you could take. Yes,
No,
Don't we say Mashakan and Mashakan so Isha Kansabaha?
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. We'll see. Let's see when we get to. Let's not get ahead of the Gemara. What?
the kasuba says he will pay for hiyuvim.
Well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay? Okay, so what happens? Okay, right? Ve'im shalahita behema, and if the animal is hers, and as I suggested, one way it might be hers is if somebody gave her an animal on the condition that her husband have no association with it. Okay, what happens? Then in that case, hachatat tamut, the animal that was designated for the chatat, namely the female lamb, has to be put in a pen, okay, with no food and die on its own. Va'olah, and as regard to the olah, the male lamb, to karev, that animal is to be offered, all right, as an olah, okay, but that is a voluntary olah, okay, shlamim, again, in that animal, to karev shlamim, again, voluntary shlamim, that's done then, but there is a very clear parameter here in that situation. V'ne'achalin liyom echad, it is eaten like a normal Nazareth vow in 1 day's time. Ve'enan tu'unim lechem, but it does not require any bread offerings or meal offerings, which would make it unlike a Nazareth vow.
So it's clear what.
Okay, so that's the point.
But she didn't become a Nazir because he was Hagar.
Okay,
But that's only to the future.
all right. So the point is,
So she was for a period.
in other words, if he was Gies, remember that was the phrase. If he severed it, okay, okay, all right. Now that has nothing to do with that. Okay. Okay. He has actually to the time till they bring the offerings. Okay. Now, second part of the Mishnah. Hayula ma'ot stimin. If she has unspecified or unallocated funds, in other words, she hasn't designated the money for each of the 3 items. Whoa, hold on. Okay, let's just finish and then you can comment, okay? All right, in that case, yiplu l'nedava. In that case, it becomes voluntary. All right? Ma'ot mefurashim, if she has, however, allocated. So in other words, if before she had one lump sum of money and hadn't designated the money, the specific monies for each of the animals, okay, it's one thing. That's nidava. Ma'ot mefurashin, but if it's specified or allocated for each, okay, damei chatat yelchu liyam hamelach, the money that had been designated for the chatas offering gets tossed into the sea, okay, the Dead Sea. Lo nehenim v'lo mo'ilim bahem. Okay, one does not benefit from it, nor does one have any misuse from it. Okay, Michael, now, go ahead.
No, I was just, if you put $500 in an envelope and say, this is for my bonus, that's called undesignated.
Yes,
But
that's-
if you list on the envelope, 200 for this.
That's what I just said, right? I said specified or allocated versus unallocated, which was a single sum, okay? That's the difference, okay? So what happens? Okay, so the going on, Deme Ola, Yaviu Ola, the money that was designated for an Ola offering goes to the Ola. Umo'alin Bahen, but that money, one could be subject to misuse of that money, and that's the case. Deme Shlamim, the money for the Shlamim, comes from the allocated or specified, right? Yaviu shlamim, one must bring shlamim. V'ne'achalin liyom echad, okay, and again, it's eaten in 1 day. Ve'ein tu'unin lechem, and it does not require the bread, biscuits, etc., offerings. Okay, okay, bagels, I don't know. Okay, so what happens? Now the Gemaras want, so we said one of the underlying questions of the Mishnah to carry into the Gemara was, how can we really say it was her animal? If, as Alan pointed out to us earlier, we normally say that what's hers is his, right?
One other point though, the Mishnah talks about the Ela with respect to the Oma and the
Shlomi.
There's no Me'ila.
Shlomi. Okay, right, okay. So that becomes one of the underlying questions as we move into the Gemara. Man Tana, okay, the Baal lo mishta'abed la. Who is then the Tana who teaches, doesn't the husband have a certain responsibility, okay, through the ketubah to her, okay? In other words, doesn't he have this responsibility?
That's not.
What? Okay, doesn't he, okay? I'm just phrasing the question differently, okay? Because the Tana seems to be teaching in our Mishnah that he does not have this responsibility, okay? What's the point? Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Rabbananhi. That's the view of the rabbis, he says. The Isal Gadatcha Rabbi Yehudahi, because if you think that our Mishnah is the product editing statement of Rabbi Yehuda, who has a machloket with the rabbis on this issue, and we're going to see what that is momentarily, right? Amai teitzei v'tireh ba'adah. Why then should the animal simply go back and join the flock and drop its sacred status? Hamishta la. Okay, again, don't we normally say that the husband has some responsibility to provide things for his wife based on the ketubah? So wouldn't it then be his property? How can we say it's her animal at all, right?
If he has an obligation to provide it,
Then he
how
has,
can we say it's still his?
That's what he said.
The
That's what I
Reisha
said.
says if it's still his, he goes back.
no, it starts off, it says, Hefrisha et behemta, her animal. That's what the ratio started, okay? So what happens? Titania. But we're taught in the following bright, okay, which really should be a Mishnah, okay? Rabbi Yehuda says as follows, Adam mevi korban, all right, right? Ashir al ishto. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, that if a man has to provide the animal for a commitment made by his wife that would be resulting in her need to bring a korban, it must be on a certain status of that of a rich man, okay?
He is.
Okay, whether he is or not, okay, really, okay? So what happens then? V'chein kol korbanotah shehi chayevet. And likewise, all offerings for which she is obligated. Shekach katavla. Why? Because it's written what he wrote in the ketubah for her. Kol achrayus de'it lech alai min kadmat dina. Okay, any responsibility that I have towards you from beforehand. Okay, that's the point. Now,
What if she sins still?
right. Exactly. So Rava Amam. So what does Rava tell us now? Afilu tema Rabbi. No, he's arguing, no, you could interpret our Mishnah here, not just like Rabbanan, but also like the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Why is that the case, says Rava? Ki misha'abed la b'milta detzrichala. Because when he has this responsibility towards her, it is something that she indeed requires. It's necessary for her. B'milta de lo tzrichala, lo. But in something where she does not have a real need, yes, he must provide her her needs. Okay, but if it's not a real need, no, he doesn't have to give them.
He was made for the Naziris, so she has no longer a
So
need.
that might be the reason, since
That is the
okay,
reason.
that
That's what
since
we're
he
calling.
nullified the vow, right? He nullified the vow. The vow is not in existence. Therefore, what's the result? The result is she does not have to bring. That's the point. Okay? Ika da Amri. And there are others who say this whole situation in another way. Mantan, who is the one who is the editor or speaker of this Mishnah? Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, Rabbi Yehudahi. It is Rabbi Yehuda. V'chi misha'abed la, okay, b'milta detzricha la. And when is he responsible, okay, towards her? In those certain things where she has a need, okay? B'milta delo tzricha la. But in something where she does not have a actual need, lo, okay? De'i rabbanan, because if it's the rabbis, lo mish'abed la klal, they would say in this situation, okay, he does not have any responsibility towards her. Because we could then say clearly, since he was mayfair the vow, that is the reason that he no longer has any responsibility. He's done away with her vow. She's not then a Nazareth. She's nothing to bring. Okay.
Excuse me. If he did have a responsibility and he consecrated the animal and then he revokes the vow, that means the animal doesn't have to be consecrated?
It's unconsecrated.
It means that the animal is considered to be his.
This is where
He sends it back out to the field, to the pasture with the rest of the flock, and the animal is desanctified, deconsecrated.
Rabbi Green, this is where the Grizz said. that.
Exactly. Okay. Elahechi dami de misha'abedla. So the Gemara now goes back into what I said was that underlying motif. Okay. In other words, at what point do we really say he has this responsibility towards her? Okay. Because think about it just for a brief moment. If we say that the husband's mayfair is retroactive, that's one thing. But if we say it simply severs, okay, and there was therefore a certain amount of time that the Nazarethship was applied to her, was in effect, okay, in that case, wouldn't he have a responsibility still to provide it for her? Because that's part of what would be required by the ksuba.
Well, that's what's written in the Ksuba, she's required.
Exactly. That's why the underlying question here in the Gemara.
What do you bring if you can't afford the animals?
What?
That's a different issue. Let's put that aside for right now. Heshi's question is, if you can't afford the animals.
It's a lower level.
Okay, on certain korbanot, okay, the Torah clearly defines it as based on one's affluence, status, okay? So if you can't bring it by, you have X, Y, and Z. So if you can't bring, all right, so to speak, and therefore that would apply in those situations,
These would be like birds.
okay?
Yeah, it's a chatas ha'ol.
Right, that would be the least, right? Okay, let's go on now. Kagon, okay, so what are we saying here? All right, let's assume so under what circumstances would we say that his responsibility based on the ksuba does apply? Kagon da'aknahi la, where she has the right to acquire, okay? But kevan da'akne la, okay? And since she has the right to acquire it, hava de nafsha, it's therefore considered like it's her own, okay? Let's go on now to our, okay. All right, so what happens? Okay, Rava now goes back and comes back and tells us again. Remember before he said you could even say it's Rabbi Yehuda. Now he's coming back and presenting the flip side. Rava Amar Afilu Tema Rabbanan. You could even say that our Mishnah accords with the rabbis. Why? Ki makne la nami. Because when she does acquire it, right? What happens? B'milta detzrichala. Because it's something that she has a need of, right? B'milta delo tzrichala. In a situation where she does not have a need for it, lo makne la. Then she is not able to acquire it. Okay? We pick up now with the next part of our Mishnah. Im shala haita behemta, okay? chatat tamut va'olat tikarev. The Mishnah telling us again that if the animal does belong to her, all right, then that, all right, and the vow has now been nullified, right, Mayfair, right? Right, so what happens? The chatas, we said, put in a pen and is starved, and the ole has to be brought. Okay, so the Gemara asks, he menala. Okay, in that situation, how is it?
This is Alan's question.
Okay, ha'amart, but didn't you say again? In other words, how could we have said that the animal again becomes hers based on what Alan pointed out again, that what she acquires is supposed to go to the husband? Masha kanta isha kana ba'ala, exactly, Alan, like you pointed out. That's why I said, well, I don't want to jump ahead sometimes if the Gemara is going to raise the question for us. Okay, isn't that clearly what we understand? Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, shekamsata me'isata, that she basically saved it from her food allotment. Okay, and then she had that extra money and could use that to acquire.
The husband has to give her a mana every.
Right. Remember, there are certain things that clearly he has to provide for her from the ksuba. Besides tashmish, okay, there is also food allotment, clothing, etc., things like that. Okay, so what happens? Ibayis ema. I might have thought to ask the following: the akne la echa cher, that maybe I said maybe somebody else allowed her to acquire it. In other words, he gave it to her. Va'amarla, and when he gave her the animal, he specifically told her, Almanat she'ein leba'alech reshut bahen, that your husband has no rights to this animal, no permission to use it, have it, own it, etc., etc. Okay? Now, again, from our Mishnah, ha'oleh tikarev olah, v'hashlamim tikarev shlamim. Right? Amar le Shmuel la'avuha bar ihi. So Shmuel then says to another colleague, Avuha bar ihi, all right? And I'm going to suggest again that if you're using Art Scroll, make a note or a circle around notes 24b, number 7 and number 8, okay? To look at that in more detail, okay, another time, all right? We have a statement, he told him, Lo tetev al karecha ad amart li hada milta. I will not, don't sit down, basically. Okay, in other words, you have to remain standing until you're able to explain to me one particular item. It's really more than one item. Okay, it is a concept here, right? Ve'eluhein arba'a elim she'enan tu'unin lechem. Okay, and we have 4 examples of rams. That's why we pointed out that the ram was one of the offerings. Okay, all right, that do not require a concurrent, I'm going to say, meal bread offering. Okay, right? 40 loaves, if I remember, but as I said, right? Okay, but that's why I said I point out that Art Scrolls gives a little bit more detailed clarification in numbers 7 and 8. Shelo, one is his. V'shela, hers. V'shela achar mita, after the death. Okay, and we'll clarify that further on in the Gemara, right? V'shela achar kapara, and after one has gained their atonement. Okay, Shela, when we say it's after him, Hada Amran, as we've said already, namely that it could be her animal,
The shlamim that she
right?
gives as an adult.
Right? That particular animal could be hers because somebody gave it to her. Okay, that was one example.
And that's why it doesn't, and that does not be.
Why it does not need the bread, right? Okay, Shelo. By the way, notice the difference in the order. Okay, here. Okay, It started Shalo, Shalah, okay? But now it comes back and tells us Shalah and then Shalom.
Because we
Okay?
had it already.
Why? Shalom, Titnan, because we learn elsewhere in a Mishnah. Ha'ish madir et beno benazir. In another Mishnah, it tells us about a situation where the father makes a vow that his son is to become a Nazareth. Ve'ein ha'isha maderet et bana benazir. But the mother cannot make a vow of Nazarethship for the son. Gilach, if the son shaved himself, or shugilchuhu krovim, or other family members gave him a shave and a haircut, right?
Which means they protest.
Right, which is going to tell us what happens. Micha, he objects. O shemichuhu krovim, or the other family members objected. So they could do either an act to show the objection, which was the shaving, or a verbal objection. Either way,
And then that.
right?
is not-
What happens? Hayulo ma'ot stumim. If he had then the unspecified funds, in other words, a single lump amount, yiplulin adava. Okay, clearly that has to go for voluntary offerings. Ma'ot mefurashin. If the money has been spelled out, specified for each of the individual korbanot, right? Demei chatat, the money for the chatas, yachuli yam hamela, will go to the Dead Sea. Demei olah, the money for the burnt offering olah, yaviu olah. Okay, he must bring an olah, uma'olin bahen. And it's possible that we must be careful because that money, it can be a situation of me'ila, subject to misuse. Demei shlamim, the money that is shlamim designated, yaviu shlamim, must bring shlamim, v'nechalin liyom echad, and it's eaten in one day, ve'enan tu'unim lechem, and it does not require bread. So we've now given 2 out of the 4 examples. We're now going to get to the other. There are 4.
Yes, but we had.
We've got 2. Shelo, Shelah. That's all we've gotten so far. Now we're getting to the third one. Shelachar mita. Okay, after death, minalan. How do we know this? The Tanya has also taught really in a Mishnah and not a Braita, right? Hamafrish ma'ot l'naziroto. One who separated the coins, the money, regarding his nazirut. Lo nehanim v'lo ma'alim bahem. He cannot benefit from them, and it is not subject to misuse. Right?
No, it's not.
Lo ma'alim.
That's what he said.
Right, not subject to misuse. Okay? Mipnei shehein ru'uyin lahavi bekulan shlamim. Because that money is suitable and can be brought for other shlamim. Okay? So what happens? Mate vayulo ma'ot stumim. If he died, okay, and there was money there already that was unspecified, yiplulin adava. That money should go for voluntary offerings. Ma'ot mefurashin. But if the money has been allocated, right? Demei chatat yilich liyam hamelech. The money for the chatas goes to the Dead Sea. Lo nehanin v'lo mo'alim. One cannot benefit from it, and nor can one then be subject to misuse. Demei olah, money for the olah offering. Yaviu olah, one should bring the olah. Uma'olin bahen, and be careful because that money is subject to misuse. Demei shlamim, the money for the shlamim. Yaviu shlamim, should bring and offerings of shlamim. V'ne'echalin liyom echad, and it's eaten in one day. Ve'enan tu'unin lechem, and they do not require bread. So that was the third example. Now the fourth and final example, shela'achar kapara, after atonement. Svara, seems logical to understand as follows. Shela'achar mita, if it's after death, ma'itam, what's the reasoning? The lo chazia lekapara, because it's not suitable or viable for kapara. Namely, the death of the person is the greatest kapara. So why then would one need to have to bring a particular animal offering for kapara? Shelachar kapara. Why? Because after kapara, nami ha lo chazia lekapara. Here, therefore, there is no suitable requirement for the kapara. Vatuleka, and no other examples. Vaha'ika, but there may be. V'sha'ar kol shalmei nazir, sheshachtan shelo kamitzvatan. Okay, and other examples, right? Of where there is, all right, the situation of the nazir, that the animal was slaughtered not according to its appropriate mitzvah procedure. Ksherim, they're valid. V'lo olin, right? You could use them for something, namely usually a shlamim. V'lo olin leba'alim l'shum chova, but they do not satisfy the requirement or the obligation of the owners. V'nechalin liyom echad, they are eaten for one day. Ve'enan tu'unin lo lechem v'lo zroa. And in those situations, not only do they not require bread, they also do not require the giving of the foreleg, which would be going to the.
You do give it, you
Which
don't
is
cook it.
part of
Yeah.
that showing.
No, the
You
Kohen
give
wouldn't
the
get it.
raw foreleg to a Kohen. You
Okay.
don't cook
The
it.
pshat I saw that says he doesn't get it. Okay, kimitzvatan kachashiv, but isn't that like the mitzvah? Shelo kimitzvatan lo kachashiv, right? And not according to mitzvah, that is not considered. That's where we're going to stop today. Okay, and we'll pick up on the bottom there tomorrow with because they.
Thank you, Rabbi Green. Have a good day.
Okay, take care, Bob. Go away, Bob.
So the moral of this story
Yeah.
is don't designate your animals until you're ready to bring them.
Because you just like the top, you live in